Hey everyone, it's Brooke and I'm here today to do part one of my July wrap up. I do want to quickly note that the reason videos are going to be a little bit less constant right now is because I'm trying to create a filming space in my house. Right now the only space I really have is this one, which is in my dining room, which is fine in terms of filming. It's just that all of my books are upstairs and carrying them up and down the stairs is a bit of a nightmare when you're lazy like me. So until I get all of that situation sorted out, you might not see me but 2 to 3 times a month, hopefully at least. So in July, I read 10 things. I didn't participate in any of the readathons. I said I would and I didn't. I just, as soon as I say I'm going to be in a readathon, I always just crap out. So I should stop even trying. So it was also a really mixed bag month. There were some really high highs and some low lows. And this video is gonna have the 2 lowest books. So, settle in for some negativity because that's how we roll here on my channel. The first thing I'm going to tell you back is my one DNF of the month. A book that I am so disappointed that I DNF'd. I really thought it was going to be like something I could add to my favorites forever list, and not so much. That is 4th of July Creek by Smith Henderson. This was a debut in 2014 and it was just super critically acclaimed. I bought it immediately. So many people were talking about it. People still talk about it like it's one of their favorite books of all time. And so I just really thought I was in for a treat and I sort of put it off. And then I picked it up finally on the 4th of July because it seemed very appropriate. And I got about halfway through. I think it's a pretty chunky book. It's almost 500 pages and I got to about 250. So it follows this kind of sort of anti-hero named Pete. It's the early 1980s in rural Montana. He's a child protective services officer, so a social worker. And the blurb kind of sells it like he meets this really kind of neglected kid whose father is this crazy survivalist who lives in the woods. And it almost sounds like a thriller following that family. They're barely mentioned. There's very few scenes with them in the first 250 pages of this book. Most of this book is following around Pete in his miserable life. And it started to feel a lot like torture porn. There's a scene with a dog it was not okay. And yeah, it just goes into how terrible he is as a father. His family's falling apart. He's estranged from his wife. They're all kind of shitty people. The mother, the daughter, the father, all of them. And I'm just supposed to care. It felt very dude bro, like here's my sad white man existence, care for me, look at all my problems, and stopped focusing on the people he is supposed to be good at helping, and it bothered me a lot. That being said, it also bothered me the language, the writing. At first I was really taken with it. I was like, okay, this guy can really write. He writes some really beautiful sentences, but then it started to be too much, and he shifted tenses a little bit, and he would shift perspectives randomly, and he would use kind of gimmicky little interview sections that didn't make much sense to me. And it just all became like he was trying way too hard, and he likes the sound of his own voice, which added to the kind of dude bro mentality that I was getting from this. And all of the important plot points and the character development and everything was just getting lost between language. This started out beautiful, but eventually just became very self-indulgent, and I couldn't do it anymore, and I just didn't care. And at 250 pages, I was just not wanting to read it all, and I knew it was this book's fault, and so I put it down and moved on with my life. I probably would have ended up rating it 2 stars if I had actually finished. A book that I did finish but rated 1 star, so yes, I do think it is worse than 4th of July Creek, but I did manage to finish it because it was quick. Modern Lovers by Emma Straub. Now, I got this from Book of the Month, so it was discounted heavily, which makes me feel better. I read The Vacationers last year on a plane ride home from San Diego, and it was sort of the perfect book for that situation. And I really thought she made some interesting character decisions in that book. There is no redeeming factor. I knew going in it was just kind of the Emma Straub thing where she takes rich people and their problems and asks you on some level to care about them. And so these people live in Brooklyn, and I don't know, no interesting character moments. The characters were ridiculous. There was a point where one of the adult men in this book who had been married to a woman for very many years actually made the statement that men don't really talk to each other about sex, but he was pretty sure that women text each other after every orgasm. Almost threw it across the room and didn't pick it back up after that. I was like, this is absurd. This is insanity. Who writes this kind of shit? Like, who cares? Why am I reading this? So it was just, there were no characters that I thought were well written. No interesting decisions made in the character development process, and mostly, though, the writing was atrocious. From the grammar, there was at least one sentence in here, I swear to God, there is not a legitimate verb. I could not find it. And then there's a sentence where, you know how like a character will rapid fire like 3 or 4 questions in a row, and then the next character will answer them rapid fire in a row, and you can kind of align the answers with the question. Well, there were like 3 questions asked and like 5 answers given, and they were very generic answers. And so I was like, okay, how do I line this up? What is answering what question? And then that frustrated me. And then just little details that I don't know. I blame editor and Emma Straub for, because it was just ridiculous. Like, one of them, okay, like Emma Straub lives in Brooklyn, so she knows when the sun sets. You think she knows when the sun sets, but she makes this character this really kind of revelatory moment when he walks out of his house and is shocked that it's the late days of June, literally says this, and the sun is still up at 7 p.m. Yeah, the sun is still up at 7 p.m. at the beginning of summer. It's summer solstice. It's the longest days of the year in the Northern Hemisphere. It's always sunny at 7 o'clock at that time. Like, happens every year, folks. How is this something to be noted? And the characters do that so often, just little things like that. Like, that happens all the time. Like, I didn't understand why it was such a moment. I even got on Google and made sure that I wasn't going nuts. And yeah, in New York City, at the end of June, the sun sets at 8:40. That's well after 7 o'clock. And it's been happening for years and years and years. So things like that just piss me off. And then once I started noticing one, I noticed everything. And I don't recommend this to anyone ever, ever. So I think Emma Straub might be dead to me now. Okay, so that's most of the negativity out of the way. Everything else was generally pretty positive. From about, 3 stars to 5 stars. So let's talk about some good things. The thing I finished on audiobook this month that I started in June and finished in July was Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe by Benjamin Alire Sainz. I think that's how you say his name. If it's not, you can correct me below. I listened to this on audio, but I did immediately buy myself a hard copy. I loved this. This was an easy 5-star read for me. And it's not because Lin-Manuel Miranda narrates it on audio, although that was a plus. This book is a contemporary YA about 2 Mexican-American boys growing up in the 80s. They live in El Paso, Texas. And it is really just a character study of these 2 boys and their friendship. As most, or I don't know, I don't read a lot of contemporary YA, but I imagine that a lot of it is an exploration of identity, because so much of what you're searching for in those kind of late teen years is your identity. Whether it's your personal individual identity, cultural identity, sexual identity, like your identity within relationships. So with a friend, someone who you maybe have more than friend feelings for, your parents, people just in your neighborhood, in your community. And it does all of that so well, and he writes such endearing characters and the kind of characters that you care so much for. Ari and Dante are very different, and I recognize myself most in Ari, and I wish I'd had a Dante when I was that age. But they're sort of like, they're going through a lot of the same similar searches and struggles and teenage dumb stuff, but they're very different people. And it was just such a lovely friendship. This book does have LGBTQ themes and relationships, so there's that. And it was done really, really, really well, I thought. And I also want to point out that one of the things that really makes me over the moon about this book is that not only are the two boys really like completely full-bodied characters, but their parents are amazing. They're so present. And as someone who is far closer to the parents' age at this point than I am to the kids' age, I really desire that if I read YA, because it's such a YA trope to have absentee parents, and I don't get that. I just don't. I know it makes it very convenient for kids doing whatever the hell kids want to do, but I appreciated this book being the opposite of that and having these adult characters with full lives and full personalities and individual voices, and I cared about them just as much as I cared about their sons. So I just think this book was great. The ending was fantastic. It was the kind of book that sort of sneaks up on you and you just have this really big emotional response to it at the end. I was grinning like an idiot over the last chapter, and all of these awards deserves all of them. I'm so happy to have read it. And I know a lot of people really love this book, and I know some people are just sort of so about it, but I am on the 5-star side of the fence, so it gets all of the love for me, and I know he's writing another one, so super excited. I can't wait to get back to Ari and Dante. They're characters that I care about and want to know what they're up to. The next book I read, I was kind of reading at the same time I was reading Ari and Dante, and they both feature teenage LGBTQ relationships, especially between two boys. So it was interesting kind of comparing and contrasting these two books. It was Carry On by Rainbow Rowell, which was my book club selection for the month. We decided to read something fun because the world's been shit, so we just wanted to kind of escape into another world, something just silly and fun and light. And one of the girls on my book club suggested this, and everyone was more than happy to read it. Now, I read Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell, really enjoyed it because it hit on a lot of nostalgia for me. It was very similar to my beginning college career. So, and I've been big into the fan fiction world. I've been a fan fiction writer. I still am a fan fiction writer. So these kinds of things really interest me. And this is a 3-star read for me. I really liked the way she takes the Chosen One tropes, because this is so a play on Harry Potter, and turns them on their heads and makes really interesting commentary out of the changes she makes. I think we had a really good discussion about a lot of the ways she sort of doesn't play into the tropes. Like the idea that there are people in a magical society who don't want to be magical, and so just opt out and go live normal human lives and that kind of thing. She takes a lot of those ideas and explores them and allows people to kind of be more than just magic. I don't know. I really liked it. I like the way she writes about the power of words. But the thing that pissed me off and probably knocked off, at least 1 star on its own, is because the two main characters end up sort of falling in love, Baz and Simon. And Baz is great and it makes total sense, the build up, and you're in his head and you understand. Simon, there is no build up to his feelings for Baz. He's had a girlfriend for years, and so he just ends up kind of making out with Baz and liking it, and that's totally fine. But they never, and he starts to question, it's not a book about coming out, which is fine too, but he does question a couple of times whether or not he's gay. But I feel like in a world where you're present with sort of sexual identity issues, which I know Rainbow Rowell is, in a world where you have a boy who has been happy to make out with a girl and happy to make out with a boy, then maybe he could also consider the fact that he's not on that binary spectrum and say words like bisexual or pansexual, even in just one sentence, just acknowledge that it exists. And she never does. And I hate bi erasure and just kind of the erasure of a spectrum. we only give voice to a binary system. It really bothers me, and I think it's easy to correct. I mean, he could have just been like, oh, maybe I'm gay, maybe I'm bisexual, and it could have been it. It didn't have to be a big issue. We didn't have to put a lot of attention on it. But the word should have been written in the book, somewhere in all of these pages, I think. So that bothered me, and I just think it sort of suffered from the fact that this is supposed to be like the epic final book in a series, and so we didn't get all those first books, so I wasn't as enamored with the characters as maybe I would have been had I had all that back history. But a 3-star solid, fun, enjoyable, light-hearted, escapist read for which is what 2016 at this point is kind of requiring sometimes. So yeah, that was Carry On. And then the last thing I'm going to talk about on part 1 quickly, because it is just the continuation of a series that continues to be phenomenal, and that is the 6th volume of Saga by Fiona Staples and Brian K. Vaughan. This volume was so good. I've seen so many people really, really love this one. I gotta agree. I think it's one of the strongest volumes. I loved the new characters we got introduced to, meeting up with some of our old characters that we haven't seen in a while. I think all of this, I like the time jump a lot. I think that decision was really it was a good idea, and it was well executed. And the final reveal of this volume is so good. So that was the first half of my July. I will be back soon with the second half of my July, which has another of my favorite books, maybe a couple, maybe 3 favorites. I don't know. There's some good books in that one, and I will see you guys later. Bye.